So, is the housing market going to crash, or are we past the crashing thing? We have new updated numbers from June 2022 to June 2023. Now, this is a paid article that your boy got access to, so you don't have to, right? So, we thank Fortune Magazine for this. So, we're looking at the top 100 largest housing markets, right? So, pretty much any kind of city that's over 100,000 people in population. So there's 10 that are up and 10 that are down. And it's pretty shocking because you see two markets going on right now, right? Basically the East Coast and the West Coast. And there's something called whiplash cities. So I'm going to tell you about whiplash cities in a second because that plays into this kind of whole narrative. So when we talk about is the housing market going to crash because of these interest rates that are up, which will probably go up a little higher, we have to look at how the interest rates that have already been up are affecting the markets that we already can see, right? And we're already seeing a year over year decline in some really interesting areas. So I think if you look at all these lists, some things really, really pop out at you. Some things like Sacramento and Spokane, Washington are not super interesting in terms of watching them lose value. They were incredibly expensive. And so any kind of losing value there seems like more of a regression to the mean or something normal, right? Something more normal. But some of these are a little concerning because some of these are traditionally better markets that are not as frothy, if you will, right? Las Vegas is one of them. And for Las Vegas to be down 5% is pretty concerning because that was a market that was pretty steady and just a pretty good in general market over the last few years. I remember it got hit really hard during the housing bubble, but everyone's been very bullish on it. So seeing that is pretty concerning. Honolulu, anything in Hawaii, I kind of just throw off as like such an outlier that it would be hard to really kind of ascertain any kind of like, contiguous U.S. Information there. Phoenix, Arizona is an interesting one too. So that's a city that has been getting a lot of population, obviously, from California, etc. But to see that down so much is fairly interesting. It was a market that was hugely popular for house flippers, that was hugely popular for snowbirds, leaving the cold and going down to Phoenix, hugely popular because of their taxes, blah, blah, blah. But to see it down is once again concerning, and also more concerning because this is a relatively low priced market, right? Sacramento, Washington, lots of California cities are very high priced markets. So you would expect to see them fall, but Phoenix is pretty concerning. So that's something to look at. Austin, Texas is not concerning. This is a whiplash city. So what whiplash cities are cities that got a huge increase in population during the pandemic and then have lost some since then. And Austin is one of them. Austin's actually was one of the most popular, obviously, cities to move to during the pandemic and even after that. So people thought that, Austin was going to be great forever, but it's already lost 10% of its revenue, which is really, really huge. I mean, really, really huge. So it's really, really something to look at and to, I think, be concerned about, because if this interest rates have already affected it this much, it stands to reason that more additional interest rate increases will do the same. So definitely something to look at, and definitely something we want to keep an eye out, because I do think it's going to be a general trend to even get worse. So let's see what's been doing excellent, right? And I define excellent as anything kind of above 5% growth. Now, there's a ton of great markets. I would say Charleston, South Carolina, even Savannah, Georgia. Lots of those things in the southeast, and even just the east in general, northeast is doing really well. But some of the main ones are interesting as well, and you can see them all kinds of congregating. Does that make sense? Into that southern pocket and kind of that north pocket as well. So Oklahoma City, of course, is a little bit outside of that bracket, but that is doing very well with 7%, and that's traditionally not been a huge growth market. That's just been pretty steady. So seeing traditionally steady markets grow a little bit is pretty exciting, right? Augusta, Georgia is on there. And then Rochester, New York, which has been really, really popular with house flippers, is doing still very well. Hartford, Connecticut, Omaha, Nebraska is kind of a surprise on there. And then Knoxville, Tennessee, and Texas is all on there too. And I think it's just kind of showing a shift of that people are a little more price sensitive now, so they are not investing as heavily in these heavy expensive markets, and they are pushing up the prices of some of these quote unquote lower price markets, right? All these things are not big cities. They have a smaller population than most of the ones that are decreasing. So I think kind of, if you were kind of to ascertain any kind of lessons or thoughts about this, it would be a general shift to a more price conscious, I think, buyer, right? We're still struggling with supply in general, but the more price conscious buyer is still buying, but they're buying in kind of lower cost of areas that they're seeing the price go up where they still might get a little bit of value. So that's my take on that one. I do think looking at these overall trends, they're just going to get more exacerbated over probably the next quarter or two, maybe even the next year before things settle down and shift again. But it's pretty good since it is a bifurcated market, which means half the market's going down, half the market's going up. It's kind of weird, but it means that there's still an ability to do any kind of investment strategy that you want, right? Any kind of buy and hold, any kind of BRRRR method, any kind of house flipping method, any kind of Airbnb method or whatever. And so that's something to consider. So I think it gives a little bit of buoyancy to your plans if you are a real estate investor. Also, if you're a real estate investor, need some coaching, want some thoughts on what you're doing, reach out to me. I love chatting with other people that are like us. It's nice to have some sort of circle going on when you're doing this because there's always questions. I know with YouTube, I ask questions of my buddies all the time. So this is definitely one of those things as well.